Will November 2020 be a terrible time to launch a comic book Kickstarter project? That's what I want to talk about in today's short video. I'm Tyler James. I'm the host of Comics Launch, which is a podcast all about the mindset, strategies, and tactics for making Kickstarter and crowdfunding work for you if you're a writer, artist, comic book creator, or self-publisher. And I'm also the founder of Comics Launch Pro, which helps creators take their crowdfunding efforts and audience building efforts to the next level. And I would love to hear from you if you are considering launching a Kickstarter during the upcoming month of November 2020. So as I record this, it is September of 2020. And I've had some people in my groups, some of my private groups, some sort of on the public, and other groups that I hang out with, sort of think about and express that they're thinking about launching a project in November of this year, but they're a little bit worried about that timing being bad, and particularly bad this year. And so there's the truth is, like, this is the kind of thing that comes up a lot. And so I'm going to get into and share some of my thoughts on November 2020 and specifically. But if you are someone who is planning your first launch or trying to make your next launch even better, I do want to remind you about a free resource that I put together for you, whether it's November or not. It's called the Comics Launch Comic Book Kickstarter Roadmap. You can get that for free over at comicslaunch.com/roadmap. And I'll lay out some steps and some tips for you to make this thing happen for your comic book Kickstarter project. So let's talk about November 2020. So two things I want to address. One, is launching in November bad in general on Kickstarter? And then second, will launching in November, this November specifically, be a bad time to launch? And so let's look at that first one. Is launching in November a bad time to launch? And a lot of creators and a lot of people have sort of, tried to use their common sense and their intuition and just sort of say, well, you know what? November's probably a bad month because that's getting into holiday time, and there's Thanksgiving, and then there's Black Friday, and people are focused on doing their Christmas lists, and people's expenses go up during the holidays, etc. And so it would just be a really bad time to launch and back projects on Kickstarter during the holiday season. Okay, that all makes sense, but is it true? Well, the data shows that it's not particularly true. At least for creators that do the hard work of planning, launching, funding, and planning, launching, and executing an awesome Kickstarter campaign. And I look in my own community. Last year, we had 8 projects that were successful that launched or ran almost mostly in the month of November. We had 2 creators in that group that had their most successful launch to date during November 2019. The success rate for comic book projects overall went up after November 2019 compared to the month before. And historically, there have been a lot of big projects that have launched in the month of November. I've had successful launches in the month of November. I may even have a launch that I'm planning for the month of November. So the reality is, all of that stuff about, no one backs Kickstarter projects in the month of November, it's just not true. And Kickstarter's data is plain to see. You can go log on Kickstarter. You can see all the projects that have launched in all of the Novembers that have been around over the past 11 years that Kickstarter's been in existence. Projects will fund, dollars will still flow to good projects on Kickstarter in the month of November. So that's the November thing. Let's just put that to bed, okay? Now, the second thing, though, is that creators will be like, okay, Tyler, yeah, Novembers are okay, but what about this November, right? And you can point to the election year. You can point to civil unrest that's going on in the U.S. and around the world. You can obviously point to COVID, which is still, going strong in a lot of areas of the world. And there are a lot of people worried about it taking a turn with entering flu season and all that stuff. You can point to U.S. Postal Service and issues that are still going on there, and whether or not the election and the mail, and it'll all sort of get worse. You can even look at like California wildfires and wildfires that are out west, and just point to all of these crazy things that are outside of our control that you could make a case would make November 2020 particularly awful time to launch. And so, and if you're someone that's thinking about launching in November, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what you're worried about. Let me know, or if you're not worried at all, let me know why you're not worried. All right. But here's the way I look at it. Yes, you have all of those things going on, and yes, we can, in our mind, try to make what seem to be logical notions and logical connections that all of these things would be evidence that this would be an awful time to launch. But the truth is, all of those things are going on kind of right now. Like, we are in the midst of the election right now. All right. We are in the midst of unrest right now. We are in the midst of COVID right now. We are in the midst of USPS troubles right now. We are in the midst of wildfires right now. And if you go on Kickstarter right now, there's several $1 million in funding live on the platform right now. All right. So we don't have evidence that any or all of these things are significantly adversing creators who are choosing to plan, build, and launch outstanding comic book Kickstarter projects on Kickstarter right now. And there is nothing, at least in my mind, that I've seen that suggests that that's going to rapidly, suddenly, dramatically change in the next 2 months. Now, we have seen, this is not to say that there hasn't been effects of stuff that's going on that hasn't affected the Kickstarter platform, right? Or Kickstarter itself. Like, yeah, when COVID dropped, everyone froze, or at least not everyone, but a good chunk of the entire crowdfunding ecosystem froze. Comic book creators froze, right? Hundreds, like at least 100 projects that statistically, and if you watch trends and looked at last year's data and this year's data, there were about 100 projects in the comic book category that didn't launch in the immediate aftermath of COVID, that you can probably look at that and say COVID was the reason why they didn't launch. But what we've seen is that those are the project, or that those projects and those creators that did launch, that did move forward, a lot of them had their best launches ever. A lot of them were still successfully funded. And the success rate for projects that did launch during that time continued to go up. And so once other creators saw the coast is clear, what ended up happening is each month after we hit a low in May of 2020, each month after, more and more and more creators have launched their projects confidently on Kickstarter, and they've continued to thrive. And so we're sort of at a year peak right now in terms of live projects on Kickstarter. Now, I suspect, because I'm hearing this question come from creators and I'm hearing this pop up, that there are some creators that will freeze their projects and that will not launch because of some of this fear. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a dip, in November, scaring, and maybe December too, scaring away some of those creators that have it in their mind that it's not a good time. But I want the point I want to really just make clear to everybody is that the thing that separates the pros, I'll call out my comics launch pros because this is what I try to instill with them. But the thing that separates the pros, the comics launch pros, from those who really struggle, or from those who don't launch when otherwise they could launch, is that we just recognize that we are the creators and architects of our own success, and we don't outsource that success to the actions of others, to external events, to the calendar. All right. And so I want to make it clear that if you do the work, if you create a great, compelling project, if you build an audience and get an audience excited for that project, and then if you launch that project, it's going to succeed regardless of what is going on externally. And I've seen this happen time and time and time again. And so it can happen for you too. Now, That's not to say that November 2020 won't be a bad time to launch for you, right? For you. Because you might not be at your best in November 2020. You might already be looking at the calendar and be like, you know what? That is not a good time for me to launch. Maybe you know that this election, you are locked in media consumption, news consumption, 24/7, can't get away from it, checking the scrolls, updating your Nate Silver blogs, and checking the polling tracking and doing all of that stuff. You might be a nervous wreck and know you're going to be a nervous wreck and not be able to focus on anything but the election. And so, yeah, early November might be an awful time for you to launch. Or maybe you work in an industry where overtime is going to be expected. And you're going to have significantly less time to do the kinds of things that are required to have a successful launch or to run the best launch that you possibly can launch. And if that's true, then you know what? For you, November 2020 is probably not going to be a good time to launch. But none of that is November 2020's fault, right? That is you recognizing where you are at, where your situation is, and what you need and are able to do and aren't able to do. But you're taking ownership of that. All right. There are going to be other creators where November 2020 is going to be a great time to launch. And so, as creators, in our head, we can create disaster scenarios. That's why our comics and our stories are so great. Like, right, we can come up with the worst case scenario and all the things that can go wrong, because we need that for good drama, right? But it's important that we don't use our creative skills to find the drama, to find the worst case scenarios, and we put all our focus there, and then it creates all these reasons why we shouldn't do the things that we know we need to do to move ourselves forward. And instead, I want us to put our creative energy to better uses and come up with all the reasons why it would be a great time to launch in 2020. And so we can often, if we're not careful, we can imagine that there is some perfect external time to launch and always like look for that time and put off our launch and put off our launch and put off our launch to get to that time. I saw a quote the other day that really hit home with me. It said, "The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it." So don't wait for the best time to take action. Don't wait for the best time or the best month or the best week or the best day to launch. Instead, step into that creator role, decide what action you're going to take and when you're going to take it, and then commit to making that decision the absolute best one for you, for your project, for the creators that you work with, and for the fans that you're going to rock their worlds with an awesome launch. All right. If you do that, you are going to win. You are going to be successful. All right. And so if you will be launching in and around November 2020, I know Afua has a launch coming up I'm excited about. And it sounds like she's moving forward with that one. I know we have some more creators that are planning on launching in November 2020. Go ahead and leave a comment here. Start lining up and connecting with and reaching out to and joining and being aware of the other creators, the other brave souls who are not letting the calendar dictate what happens for them in their creative business, but are instead marching forward, moving forward alongside of you. Because I got to tell you, when you are in launch mode, those people and cross promoting with those people and engaging with those people and jumping on live streams and shouting out each other's projects, like that marketing and that kind of energy just does wonders for a campaign launch. So start connecting with those people now. Find those people now. Identify those people now. All right. So hope that helps. Again, if you are not in Comics Launch Pro yet and you would like some more help or more strategies or more things to be doing to make sure that your launch is successful that doesn't have anything to do with the calendar or timing or external events, go download that free Successful Comic Book Kickstarter roadmap. It's at comicslaunch.com/roadmap. Hope that helps and hope this helps anyone who needed to hear it. And I can't wait to see I can't wait to see what you launch next. I love Fired Up Tyler. Yeah, man, it's Monday morning. Got myself a haircut for the first time since shut down from my barber, and I'm ready to rock and roll this week. I hope you are too. All right, take care, everybody.